I'm Tim Ventura from AmericanAntiGravity.com, and I'm speaking today with John Bloomer, CEO of Discraft Corporation, entering the disc-shaped Space Tourist launch vehicle in the X Prize competition. Well, John, first things first, I'd be remiss not to mention that your spacecraft, the Space Tourist, looks suspiciously like a UFO. It's a beautiful disc-shaped design, and I'd say the most innovative flight platform being entered in the contest. Can you tell me can you tell me just a bit about why you went with a circular planform?
Well, I have done, maybe 35 years of research on aircraft design. I'm a former Lockheed, Boeing, North American, Northrop, and Douglas engineer at one time or another in the past, and got very seriously interested in aircraft design, and the flying saucer type of configuration turns out to be by far the best approach to aircraft design to beat the airplane and the helicopter simultaneously. It turns out that if you consider the space that's wasted in the airplane, all the empty space between the fuselage and the wing, and if you fill that space in, like in this craft of mine, which is shaped like a flattened coolie hat, Chinese coolie hat, it has a peak at the center and flattens down to a circular rim. Turns out that filling in we can very advantageously fill in the space and have a craft that is no bigger than an airplane, but has far more capability. It's far safer, it's far stronger, and it is even peculiarly appropriate to suborbital flight, which is what I designed it for. I designed it for the X Prize competition for suborbital flight for space tourism.
Absolutely. Well, the circular shape gave you some unique design options, and one of the real innovations in this design has been the engine. Can you tell us a bit about the engine that you'll be using?
Yes, this is the so-called blast wave engine. Dr. Lockwood here in Oregon was the man who greatly improved the blast wave engine. It's a U-shaped thing. It's a Pulsejet. Very simple, no moving parts. It has a burner, and essentially it was invented by a Frenchman named Marconnet, M-A-R-C-O-N-N-E-T, in France back in 1912. Lockwood picked it up and drastically improved it. It has a very low fuel consumption, only about twice as much as a conventional jet plane today. A jet airliner today has only about twice as good, or maybe less than twice as good as fuel consumption. So the Pulsejet, of course, was first introduced by the Germans in World War II in their so-called buzz bomb, which had terrible fuel consumption. This is a greatly improved design. Very, very simple, no moving parts, very inexpensive, but it takes up a lot of space. Boeing has looked at it and turned it down, and I presume the reason was that it takes up so much space, it's totally airplane. And of course, Boeing is only interested in building airplanes, so they rejected it. But it's ideal for a flying saucer or circular planform configuration.
Absolutely. Well, the old German buzz bomb had some real problems with the reed valves degrading during operation, but since yours doesn't have any moving parts, you've managed to dodge that.
For example, yes, that was one of the worst problems of the German buzz bomb.
Yeah, I've actually seen Lockwood Pulsejets on the internet. Several people have actually built very small models, so it's great to see a larger version coming out. Although they are loud, aren't they?
They are very loud. Ray Lockwood's son has demonstrated them for us, some of us here in Portland, and it was a fairly small model, maybe only 3 or 4 feet in overall size, but it was very noisy. We were wearing earmuffs, and I still had problems after several days. It was very loud.
Absolutely.
But the noise can be overcome. There are ways to do that, and it's still going to be one of the most efficient engines ever designed.
Sure.
But it's totally inappropriate to the airplane. Of course, it's even more inappropriate to the helicopter. Consequently, for a circular planform craft, it's ideal.
Well, one of the most popular disc-shaped craft that most people are aware of was the 1950s Avrocar, but it suffered from stability problems from air pileup under the wing surface. Have you had to overcome any challenges with stability? And if so, what was your solution?
Well, yes, the stability is the most important consideration that I addressed in researching and ending up with the circular platform. The stability of the Aerocar was incredibly bad. I don't understand why so much money was spent on it, because any amateur aeronautical engineer would have spotted the problem from the word go. It had its center of mass at its geometrical center, but for longitudinal true stability, your center of gravity has to be ahead of the aerodynamic center, and the aerodynamic center for a wing is 25% of the way back from the leading edge on the principal chord. Consequently, the Aerocar had to be totally unstable, and I talked to the test pilot. His name was Alan Knight. I talked to him in Palo Alto back in 1969, I think. And he explained to me that he got it going up to about 30 miles an hour, and the nose started coming up. He gave it full nose down control power, and the nose still kept coming up, which is exactly what any amateur engineer would have predicted. And then he shut it down and stepped out of it and walked away from it and said, "Find yourself another test pilot. This damn thing is dangerous."
Yeah. Well, even in the flight tests where it wasn't moving forward, you could see the air pile up, and it's kind of sloshing around on it a little bit. Again, that saucer shape tends to just kind of rotate, even if it's sitting still a little bit. So, well, I guess the big question here is money. Some of your X Prize competition are being sponsored by big-name financiers, and others are pulling together more of a community effort to raise funds. How much will your design cost to build, and have you been able to find sponsors to cover the cost?
Well, no, I haven't. I haven't looked too hard, but as a matter of fact, I've been expecting that some of these sponsors would come forward and want to talk to me after they understood what the difficulties are with the X Prize entries that have been put in, including returns. Essentially, these things are a little bit scary. To me, they're quite a bit scary. I wouldn't put foot in any. They frighten me. I want something big and stable and super stable and super strong, and none of them are that. I really don't understand why the big sponsors are going for any of these designs, because they look to me frightening. And of course, I'm not a test pilot. A test pilot might be interesting, but to an average citizen who wants to buy a ride into space, I would think he'd be frightened to death.
Yeah, definitely. Well, when we spoke last night, I was surprised to learn that you're a big fan of electrogravitic technology. Now, your X Prize vehicle is just using a Pulsejet, but are you keeping an open mind towards eventually replacing the engine with some kind of electrogravitic drive?
Oh, totally open. In fact, I am very pro electrogravitics. I'm very pro the advances in technology that will occur when we get around to applying the technology we already have. But in the meantime, amateurs like ourselves are coming up with the same technology, and sooner or later the public is going to become aware that there is a vast improvement in technology available. Free energy is almost in front of us. The flying saucers quote that from outer space that we've been talking about for 50 years, some of them, of course, are right here, but essentially they're using a kind of energy which is far beyond anything that we use concurrently publicly. They couldn't be using anything that we're aware of in terms of energy in the public domain.
Sure.
They have far greater performance. It's impossible to conceive of how they could perform as they do. Technology, energy, freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another engine question for the Pulsejet. The Lockwood is an air-breathing engine, but when you reach maximum altitude, you'll effectively be in space. Are you going to have to bring an oxidizer on board to run the engine at those altitudes, or is there still enough atmosphere to provide thrust?
Well, my calculations indicate that we can get up to Mach 10 within enough of the atmosphere to provide a sufficient amount of oxygen. After that, you're coasting on a parabolic arc to 63 miles high, which is the limit that X Prize has stipulated. And then that's the peak of your parabolic arc, and then you coast back, and then once you're back in the atmosphere, of course, sufficient amount of atmosphere, you can have a sufficient amount of oxygen to brake. And essentially, what I'm proposing is a craft that gets up to a Mach 10 speed within enough of the atmosphere to use the atmosphere for oxidation. Of course, at the peak of the arc, we're going to have to use spaceship controls. So we're going to have to use onboard controls for stabilizing and guidance and station. This is no big trick. We've been doing things like this now for at least 50 years.
Absolutely. Well, how far along are you in actually building the craft, and will you be able to meet your scheduled flight date?
Well, actually, I don't have any scheduled flight date. At this point, I've done a very thorough technical analysis, about 100 pages, which has satisfied me that we have here a practical, within classical mechanics, a practical craft. At this point, nothing has been done. I have a scale model built, which is about 5 feet in diameter, and I have the mathematical model from the technical study I did, but that's where it is. That's where it is. Essentially, I'm waiting for the aeronautical community to catch on to the fact that this is a better way to go than any of the other approaches that have been proposed I'm aware of. Simply because it's bigger, it's safer, and it's cheaper to go into space this way than with any of the other things I'm aware of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well,
I think we can sell tickets for $1,000 a ride and make plenty of money, according to my calculations. You can do a ride in my craft to suborbital altitude, 63 miles and back, would take about an hour, and we have a 6-foot ride. Don't have much space for people left. There's too much engine space required. But at 6 per day and say 12 rides per day, 6 per ride and 12 rides per day, we're going to make enough money that it would be a very significant payback at $1,000 a head. I understand Burt Rutan's craft he's developing for space tourism for the public at $100,000 a head. If we can beat that by 100 times, great. If it's a little bit more expensive than that, we're still. I think the price of going into space should be far less than $100,000 a head.
Sure. Well, in terms of raising funds for it, have you ever thought about kind of doing the nonprofit approach? Because that seems to be working for the Da Vinci Project, and I believe they're an Ontario-based company. That's actually
with whom? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the other X Prize competitors, the Da Vinci Project, has put together a nonprofit approach to raising the funds.
That might be a way to go. I have thought of such things. I haven't done anything about it yet, but certainly that would be not a bad idea.
Sure. Well, and then, the other approach is finding kind of the Paul Allens of the world with an interest in getting into space and seeing these technologies move forward. And
well, that example, for example, would be a great thing should it happen. And as I say, I'm sort of sitting back here and waiting for developments. That would be nice, very nice. I presume that there are people out there like Alan who really believe in space and really want to see us go, and that they're aware and interested in contributing to getting the public to be aware about space. I believe that space technology is the future of the human race, and therefore we need to get people much more excited and acclimatized to going into space and doing the things that one does when one goes into space.
Absolutely. Now, with your X Prize craft, and again, just, it was designed for a contest that really just goes up to the edge of space and comes back. But, given further advancements and, given a few years additional design time, is this the kind of craft that could someday reach the moon?
Well, yes, with a new kind of propulsion, with a free energy or zero gravity or electrogravitics, yes, with this new technology that's coming up over the horizon, definitely fitting this same craft with the new technology to go to the moon or Mars or anywhere else just about you want to go. It's an ideal shape both for an interplanetary, interstellar craft as well as an earthbound atmospheric craft. The circular planform shape is ideal for all of these purposes, according to my technology and according to my research. Therefore, such a craft as I'm proposing for suborbital flight could definitely next be designed for orbital flight, and then fitted with new engines, with the electrogravitic type engines, to go to the moon or Mars or anywhere else. Essentially, it's a prototype for a new kind of a aerospace craft.
Absolutely. Well, and the circular planform also gives it additional structural stability, and it's a popular design for electrogravitic concepts. The Searle effect IGV vehicle looked a lot like a quote unquote UFO design. So
yes, it did.
So yeah, this is definitely a design that keeps popping back up. And I think
yes.
in part, a lot of the electrogravitic designs that we've seen actually use rotational components. Again, that the Searle effect used a rotating ring bearing system, for lack of a better description. So, it definitely, the circular planform, I think, is on its way in, as being kind of a new approach.
Yes, it is. I believe this is the future of aerospace engineering. And the sooner we get there, the better, because the Earth our planet has a lot of grave problems that can be solved by advanced astronautics. There are four or five major problems which I'm aware of, that each of which could be attacked by advanced astronautics. One, for example, is Dr. Ultraviolet superwave. It evidently every galaxy in the universe has a core, as ours does. It's in the constellation of Sagittarius, and that core periodically explodes because, according to Ultraviolet, the Big Bang theory is wrong. That the tired light theory is the correct one, and it turns out, according to him, there is a spontaneous creation of matter. The more matter that's around, the more likely is that there will be creation of new matter. And of course, our galactic center being the most dense matter in this galaxy, it creates a lot of new matter, and it has to get rid of it. So it explodes in what he calls a superwave periodically every perhaps 27,000 years.
I've actually
heard the superwave has terrible effects on Earth. It wipes out a lot of life on the surface.
I've heard 4 or 5 different approaches to a similar idea. One was also being that because the stars are packed so closely in our galactic center, that if one of them goes supernova, it can literally take the other stars around it supernova as well. So it's a popular idea in science.
Yes. Well, he's the greatest scientist, I think, of the century. He's done a tremendous amount of beautiful work. He has written 4 major monumental books on the whole subject. And I would say that that's one of the problems that's facing humanity. Another, of course, is asteroids. We really don't know when an asteroid might have a deadly effect in impacting Earth. We don't know where all these things are, how fast they're going, and what trajectories they're on. Should one be seen to be approaching with an earlier invention of mine, which I call, it's an optical invention, which is capable of concentrating solar energy by a new kind of optics to a pinpoint of a multi-terawatt power, we can actually turn an approaching asteroid into a rocket and send it off on a new course. You can actually heat up a point on the surface so greatly that it explodes and acts like a rocket. That's another problem that humanity is facing. Another, of course, is the so-called Planet X. Well, Planet X could actually exist. There could be a very large object, maybe even the size of Jupiter, which is approaching, say, from the southern hemisphere. Very few telescopes, major telescopes in the southern hemisphere. It could be coming on a highly elliptical course and be only red, infrared. In other words, very hard to see except with the infrared type of telescope, and a very large one. And consequently, it does appear, looking at our planet's surface, that in the past mountains have gone down to the bottoms of oceans, and ocean bottoms have gone up to the tops of mountains. Well, what kind of a phenomenon would it take to cause that much damage to the planet? Well, the close approach of a Jupiter-sized Planet X would certainly could have that effect.
Sure.
Therefore, we have evidence that there has something catastrophic been happening to our planet in the past, and it could happen again at any time, of course.
Well, even the more
with a weapon of the type I'm talking about for a cosmic weapon, we could actually divert these things. We could send them off on a new course.
Sure.
That's another thing. And of course, free energy is going to be necessary to avoid the effects of global warming, and global warming is a very great hazard. It could be much more serious than what has been let on in the press. It can have actually some disastrous effects on human life. Anyway, that's another question, and there's a fourth or fifth, and that is there is the question of the collapse of hydrogen. Actually, the element hydrogen can have suffer an autocatalytic collapse, and being autocatalytic, it means that once it starts, it goes on until effectively all the hydrogen in the surface crust here and the atmosphere is burned up, which would destroy life on Earth. Of course, this is regarded as possibly what happened to Mars. That's why Mars is a dead planet. Some people think it had life, it once had water, for example, but it does appear that pollution in the upper atmosphere on planet Earth could lead to a chance effect such that we reduce some of this autocatalytic hydrogen collapse. This has been done by Dr. Randall Mills in a controlled fashion in laboratory so as to produce new materials. Dr. Randall Mills has written a vast book on the subject.
Oh, sure.
And
sure.
It does appear that what he's done under control in the laboratory could be done under no control in the atmosphere by pollutants up there, which could essentially wipe out life on Earth. Of course, this means everybody dies, and therefore it's not the sort of it's a much different catastrophe than the others, which mean that you can have enough people survive to do something about it, or at least survive. Anyway, that's another thing that we surely could avoid with advanced astronautics.
Absolutely. Well, we're out of time for today, John, but I certainly appreciate your time discussing our X Prize entry with us, as well as your thoughts on free energy and electrogravitic systems, and a lot of new and emerging technologies that can hopefully change our future in a positive way.
Yes, well, thank you very much, and it has been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks again. For additional information on John Bloomer's Discraft Corporation, please visit the X Prize website at xprize.org.